Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
The single best idea, and this needs some explanation. I think we're going to extend out over 6 minutes today. We want to be short and brief, wrapped around your longer podcasts. Thank you for the response on YouTube Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. It's, we're looking at YouTube at building that out. I've taken my eye off the single best idea ball, but we'll talk about that into Q4 as well. Michael Mauboussin is a giant on Wall Street. He is arguably the number one thinker about capital allocation, the development of profit, and the distribution of free cash flow. This started at Credit Suisse years ago, and then a wonderful period at Legg Mason and on to Morgan Stanley, where he is today. He's got a huge piece coming out. He briefed me. I can't tell you about it, but he's got a major piece coming out in a number of weeks. Right now, his piece is on the concentration on Wall Street. Michael Mauboussin now on active management.
This is the most challenging thing when you think about active management, because let's say, so just to play back, like you said, it's a handful of companies that generate most of the shareholder wealth over long periods of time. Let's say you're a portfolio manager and you're smart enough to have identified one of these and put it in your portfolio. Let's say you bought Apple 15 years ago. Awesome. What happens is it becomes so big in your portfolio that you blow through all of your diversification requirements.
Will Danoff's living this at Fidelity.
Will Danoff, so anybody that's big like that. So it's a funny thing that on the one hand, you see the numbers and you know that. And on the other hand, it's very difficult to actually take advantage of it. And by the way, for your own personal account, people can do this, right? Even Berkshire Hathaway, I know they sold back their Apple stake, but a couple quarters ago, it was 50% of their public equity portfolio. You can't run a fund with 50% in the largest company in the world, most liquid company in the world, right? On a viable business basis. So it's a very interesting contrast. But the point being, the fundamental point is this skewness, and by the way, it's not just the United States. You go around the world. Best and Binder did a paper around the world. Best and Binder did a world in developed and developing markets. Best and Binder did this work with some colleagues around the world. Same exact pattern. And by the way, we don't know exactly again why this pattern exists, but that skewness shows up. That extreme skewness shows up over time everywhere.
Michael Mauboussin there, and he's speaking about Professor Bessembinder at Arizona State, a major shout out. We always give credit across the industry to people doing good work. Robin Wigglesworth at the FT and, others. And of course, here at Bloomberg, wonderful work. John Authors was in the other day, was just brilliant. Harvey D. Shapiro at Barron's, I believe it will be in this weekend's Barron's. I may stand corrected on that. But Harvey D. Shapiro, with an absolute tour de force of what Mauboussin was talking about there, off the Bessembinder research, that there's very few winners out there. We continued our discussion on active management, the choices forward, with Michael Mauboussin.
Active management is never going to go away, nor can it go away, because it does two things that are vital. And by the way, these are very important positive externalities for the world. Number one is liquidity. Mm-hmm. People forget about liquidity. It rears its head when we don't want to see it. And then second is price discovery. So someone's got to make the trains run on time and deliver the mail, making price efficient. So indexers are free riders. Jack Bogle, by the way, God bless him, would completely agree with this. They are all just free riders. And not everybody can be a free rider, obviously, in some sort of a system. Right. So that's number one. Now, number two, just, David, to your point, why this has been so difficult is the average mutual fund manager who competes with the S&P 500 as his or her benchmark has an average size of their portfolio is smaller than the market cap of the S&P 500, right? So here's the logic is when large caps rip, which is what's happened in the last decade.
We've seen it, yeah.
Active really struggles, right? Because you're just not exposed. Now, by contrast, when small cap does well relative to large cap, active does really well. So that would be another thing to bear in mind. If you say, well, I think this concentration thing is going to go away, the small caps are going to do better, we're going to get more balanced market, that's actually as good a backdrop as conceivable for active management.
Michael Mauboussin there, he had a paper out, I'm going to guess 1999, maybe 2000, which was absolutely iconic. We did some physics. It's like Jim Caron over at Morgan Stanley. They only hire physicists at Morgan Stanley. I don't know what that's about. But we were talking about the mathematics of logarithms on the y-axis and also on the x-axis, which is called a log-log chart. And Mauboussin wrote an essay in the internet boom that to this day stands as one of the 4 or 5 most focused pieces on what we have wrought, which is the Mag 7. Michael Mauboussin on the internet era of a time ago.
It's funny, I was with a client, and this is like 2001, and the guy says, "Oh, we just lived through the dot-com boom and bust. Do you think we've wisened up and that we'll never do this again?" I was like, zero probability of that. No, maybe not zero, but basically close to zero. I mean, this is how it works. And by the way, as a fascinating side note, scientists have studied, this is how our brains, actually how we develop our brains. Synaptic connections in our brains do the same thing. Right. From the time you're born to the time you're 3, you have an explosion of synaptic connections, trying all sorts. If you've ever been around a 3-year-old, we all have been. Yes. They're very inefficient little things, but they take in everything, right? But then you prune away the stuff that doesn't matter, and you keep the stuff that's good.
Michael Mauboussin there on my puny brain. It was nice of him to bring that up. Really can't say enough about him. I'll let the cat out of the bag, and this is the power of our team here at Bloomberg Surveillance, led by Giuseppe's father, which is Friday, scheduled now, Nassim Taleb. I go way back with the wonderful Nassim Taleb. I want to talk to him about an anti-fragile America. That'll be one of the themes we develop. But a special half hour today with Michael Mauboussin. On radio across the nation, on YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. Humbled by the growth there. And of course, on podcasts, YouTube podcasts, Apple Podcasts, this is Single Best Idea.